recognize that folks out there are working. You don't have a lot of time to spend with this. And so this is going to be a relatively straightforward and short presentation uh, talking about rapid sintering, how it affects you, what you can do with it, just a lot of things that maybe you're unaware of when it comes to sintering. So let's start out with what sintering is to begin with. We sinter stuff every day, but I don't know how many people really understand how it works or what happens when you sinter. Sintering is used typically with ceramic materials and with some powdered metals. Now, what sintering is that on a molecular level, sintering diffuses atoms across grain boundaries in the ceramic, which creates a single piece. Because what we're doing, we're starting out with powder, and we're getting a solid object out of it at the end. And so sintering itself creates the solid object without melting anything, without going molten. So it requires the particles to develop an attraction to one another. And that's when the atoms cross the boundaries and start to create bonds and create strength. Now, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more discussion about rapid sintering. You may have seen rapid sintering or speed sintering at the trade shows. They sintered a crown. It looked good or it looked bad. Mainly, they look kind of chalky. They didn't look very good. Almost any ceramic will sinter quickly, but will sinter quickly well. And that's what wasn't happening. They just didn't have the idea of rapid sintering has been around, but the materials to make it work right weren't available. So here, I've got some studies here that will show, and I don't expect you to read this. This is just so you know. This top study, let's see, excuse me, the bottom study is from 2013, where they talk about how to rapid sinter, what goes on, why it works. But that's from 2013. That's 11 years ago that they were discussing this ability to rapid sinter. And that even that long ago, they identified certain things that were more helpful than others uh, to make sure that they had, as the slide showed, zirconia that actually sintered well. And here they're saying that in the top study, slip casting, which is what we do, our colloidal process, ensures better sinterability than dry processing. A high particle packing factor can facilitate the sintering of zirconia and consequently the full densification of grains. So what they're saying is the more particles that we have in a given space, the better they sinter. Makes sense because they're closer together. In this bottom study, it talked about the fact that we concluded the sintering condition, that is time, affected the grain size of dental zirconia. The shorter the sintering time, the smaller the grain size, and the decrease in grain size resulted in an increase in light transmission values of the final dental zirconia. So what they're saying is that small grains, lower sintering temperatures, shorter times, all of these things work really well if you have a zirconia that has fine grains. That is what you're looking for. Um, and that's when we get to our material, to our Beyond Plus material, or our Apex. On the left-hand side of your screen here, you'll see a 1 micron image of one of our competitors. See, this is just CIP. This is cold isostatically pressed zirconia. And you'll notice that the difference in sizes here of the grains that are actually in the zirconia itself. We've got a grain here that is 1.5 microns across. Over here, we've got a grain that's 4.25 nanometers. This grain is 4 times the size of this grain. If you look at our zirconia, because it's the way we manufacture with our colloidal process, you'll see that the grains are fairly uniform in size. They're not exact, but they're uniform, they're small, and this counts when we start sintering zirconia. It can be kind of hard to grasp here, but because you're looking at a tooth, a crown that's in your tray, and you kind of think of it as a single chunk of zirconia. But what it really is a bunch of grains, a bunch of grains. That crown may be a millimeter thick. A millimeter is 100 microns. 100 microns is 100,000 nanometers. And so what we've got is these small particles are treated by the heat on that level the same way as if they were on big level. So if you had a large rock, is that going to absorb and transmit heat as quickly as the smaller rocks like these are on here? Well, no, it's not going to. These are going to transmit heat. They're going to conduct heat more evenly, which is going to give you a more accurate zirconia and a better sintering process. When you talk about creating more grains in the zirconia, part of what goes on in terms of why you want more grains, why you want nano is that more particles create higher surface energy. Higher surface energy means strong molecular attraction. We talked about that in the beginning. Um, the stronger molecular attraction, it's easier to create bonds. Whereas a low surface energy, because you get different size particles and they're much larger, means a weak molecular bond, therefore harder to create a bond. High surface energy also means a lower activation temperature. Now, when we're talking about sintering, we pre-sinter everything. I mean, all of our discs are, when you get them, we've already sintered them up to about 1,000 degrees centigrade. And so nothing happens much below 1,000 degrees centigrade during the sintering process. And that becomes kind of the activation point for your, when you put it, run it up to 1,000 degrees as fast as you can, that's when the action starts. And when you have smaller particles, you have lower activation energy. You'll note that on our rapid sintering, our 1 hour sintering program, we're only sintering up to about 1375 or 1400, which is a lot lower than most people are accustomed to sintering. And so that can cause a little trepidation at first, but we have fired a number of units. I don't know how many. I mean, I got a tray here full of, all on fours, and I've fired trays of 25 crowns at once on our 1 hour sintering program, and they come out great. They look good, they fit good, the translucency is nice. It works really well, but that's because we have smaller grains. Um, the larger particles, when the heat's moving through there, the larger particles absorb it differently. And when they cool down differently. But it's kind of hard to think on that level when we're talking about nanometer scale particles. And this shows you again that this is on the right, it's cold isostatic pressed. It's A2 from a European manufacturer that we all know. And this is our material on the left. So when you see how big these particles are, you know now why they do not respond well to rapid sintering. They don't transmit heat easily. They retain voids, as you can see here in the particles. When you cold isostatically press zirconium, you have to use a binder. There's got to be a glue in there to hold the material together. And so when they pre-sintered up to the 1,000 degrees like we do with our zirconia, um, that binder burns out. And that's great. But it leaves behind voids because it took up space. And those voids tend to resist further compaction. So as you sinter your zirconia, it's shrinking down. It's trying to get rid of those voids in there, but it never can quite get rid of all of them just because they don't like to go away. They can't possibly be, as the particles can't fit as intimately as the smaller particles that we have here. And you can see that, here's a void, here's a void, here's a void, here's a void, and all of those voids create opacity. They prevent translucency. And so by having those voids in there, that's another reason why everybody else's zirconia doesn't really respond well to rapid sintering. Um, and that's a major thing. I mean, you've only got you're sintering this stuff in less than an hour or about an hour with 25 units. That's really moving. Um, and so as we go through the process, the the hydro or excuse me, the colloidal process that we use starts out with smaller grains. It's smaller grains in the green state. It's smaller grains in the cinder state, and all of those things contribute to lower activation temperatures and faster sintering, and it responds better. We've got, let's see, where am I at here? So the next one is here. This is showing you just some images of a green state zirconia. This is a CIP zirconia, cold isostatic press, and this is ours on the right. Now, part of the reason why these images look a little bumpy is that after we cut the discs, we had to lightly sandblast the surface to be able to see the individual grains before we took the picture. That's why it looks a little wavy. But you can see that our particles over here are much more in much greater contact, much more intimate than the cold isostatic press stuff. That means they're going to sinter better. that means they're going to respond to the temperature changes in the 1 hour firing cycle that we use. Let's see. And so what we've got is for you to take advantage of a 1 hour firing cycle, or we've got for an all on four now, we've got uh, as fast as about 3.5 hours for an all on four. This means that you guys can choose to use things. Now, you may not, your conventional sintering may work for you just fine, but by having the opportunity to sinter things faster, you have another tool that can give you greater control over what's going on in your laboratory. If you got to get, if something screws up, you have to get a crown out the same day, you got it done. If you want to go home earlier in the evening, you can sinter stuff and get it done and go home. Um, the idea behind rapid sintering has been around. We know that it's strong enough. We know that it's translucent enough. We've done of all on fours in this with our fast cycle on this, which is about 3.5 hours. They've been strong enough and translucent. They're in the people's mouths now. So by using the 1 hour firing cycle, you can create greater value for your laboratory to your doctors by being able to get crowns out quicker. You can still charge them extra for the quick crowns, but but at least you have the opportunity to do this much more easily. Um, Another thing, and this works really with our Apex and our Beyond Plus multi. Um, and this is an outcome. This is our one of our Apex crowns on the left. It's been rapid sintered. It's been polished. This is a live crown on the right, I believe, and this is pre-sintered polish from Jay Immersion, who does a lot of this stuff. So what we've got is, let me see if I got another thing. Let's see down here. One more. Okay, let's get back up to here. Um, one more thing that the finished crown that has more fine grains in it, it allows your doctor to be able to have better bond strength. And that's just another side effect of having being able to have more particles in the crown. Now, I'm going to jump now to the actual sintering, what's going on with that, and how we can work it. And I'm going to go back up to, let's see, I've got to hang on a second here. What's this? Translucency. Well, I'll leave it on this strength comparative test for right now. Let's talk about your ovens. One of the besides having besides needing or requiring a zirconia that responds well to rapid sintering or to 1 hour sintering, your sintering oven becomes um, a lot less of an appliance and more of a um, precision tool that you need to use in your laboratory. To get the outcomes correct on your rapid sintering or on the 1 hour sintering, you need to have an oven that can perform in certain fashions. Our rapid firing program, on our 1 hour firing program, we're going up, our first ramp is 150 degrees centigrade per minute. That's really screaming. Now, you can do the same rapid fire program with older ovens. Some older ovens will only allow you to enter up to 99 degrees per minute ramp speed. Um, and that's fine. That only adds 3 or 4 minutes to the process. But we're trying to get it up to where the activation temperature starts, and then we slow it down a little bit anyhow to 40 degrees a minute up to our high temp. But you do need an oven that is both accurate and that can handle the power. Newer ovens, a lot of them now have rapid sintering programs available to them. But if you've got any fairly recent oven, you can put in one of our programs and still get the rapid sintering, the 1 hour sintering out the other side. Now, the we do recommend a few things when it comes to setting up your oven for rapid sintering for the 1 hour program. We recommend strongly using what we call our temperature control rings or ferro rings to create an accurate program. What we have found is that if you use the ferro rings to calibrate your oven, that's great. But the ferro rings work on a certain program. It takes about 7 hours for the program. It goes up at 4 degrees a minute. It holds for an hour and then it drops down. Then you measure the ring, and that'll give you an idea of what the energy in your muffle is. And that's a great thing to have for overall for your sintering overall. But if you're going to be doing the 1 hour sintering, the time in the oven is only about 40 minutes at high temp. And so if you test it for an hour, your oven's going to be off. And so Daniel, one of our owners here, has devised a process where you can use set up the cycle, run the TCR, measure it out, and make sure that the temperature we've got in the muffle is the correct temperature to use. But it does take a little of you got to dial it in a little bit to make it work right. And so we need to be able to use the TCRs. You're in this in the guise of 1 hour sintering. Your oven becomes a fairly accurate tool. Um, you need to be able to know what's going on there so you get the outcomes you want. And so Daniel's devised a firing chart that will work in that regard. It's very handy to have, and it will really make your attempts at this successful. Um, this gives you a tool. This gives you a way to center stuff and get it out the door sooner, or just cut down your time that you're working. Now, to make it work, you have to set up your oven. Your oven has got to become, I always think of it as just an appliance. It always just sits there. We turn it on, don't worry about it. But with this, we do have to work with it to make sure your programs are correct to get the best outcomes. To get the best outcomes, you do need to use a material that responds well to sintering. In many of the studies that I've read, they'll compare 3 or 4 or 5 different zirconias. And frequently they'll say, oh, these three worked really well, but this one didn't work so well. And it has to do with the material itself. We know that the 1 hour sintering is accurate. We know that it's strong enough. We know the shades are good. And we know that you can get the crowns in your hand ready to go in about an hour plus some cooling time. So that's really what I had to talk to you about this morning. I realize you guys have got to get back to work, so I don't want to take a bunch of your time. If you have questions about this, if you want to know more, feel free to call in and let's visit about it so that we can get this kind of technology in your hand. We have been developing our zirconia to get to this point for quite a while. We finally figured out how to best provide it to you so that you can have a great restoration. Our Apex and our Beyond Plus Multi both respond very well to a rapid sintering to the 1 hour program. Um, Dip zirconia, not so much. One of the challenges that I faced with the dip zirconia, and I've intentionally screwed it up and unintentionally screwed it up a couple of times. I've dipped the zirconia. You have to dry it for such a long time. If you don't, it blows up in the oven because the heat rise is going up so fast that any moisture left in there will cause you problems. And so I've actually broken a couple of crowns. I'm glad they weren't due, but I broke a couple of crowns by firing them too fast. So it works best with appreciated materials. Beyond Plus Multi and Apex work really well. They respond really well. Small grain zirconia, nano grain zirconia, they sinter at lower activation temperatures and they look great. Um, this needs to be a tool in your armamentarium. You may not do everything with it, but you should be able to do it in your laboratory. Um, so that's about all I've got for you right now. If you have any questions about this or any more questions about this, give us a call and let's visit about it and see how best we can help you set up your oven, get the material in your hands, get started with it so that we can make your life a little better. Um, Thanks for attending. Thanks for being here. Like I say, give us a call. Until we see you in Chicago or some other trade show, be safe and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye. Hi, Tad. How you doing? Let's see. Okay. All right then. Thanks. See you later.